Hello, this is Victor Fordham, and this is the final video discussion board for our History 711 class. And this week we were supposed to look at the size and scale of government. And from our reading and from our lectures this week, we learned that there's basically two approaches to this when it comes to size and scale. The first one is that government is natural, like a family. That's from Aristotle, and that it should therefore be small in order to preserve freedom and liberty to the best of its ability. The other one is that it's not natural, that it's constructed. It's a view of the will that comes from Thomas Hobbes, and therefore government should be very large so that it can control chaos and it can keep us from anarchy. And the view is without coercion from the government, there's going to be anarchy, and we would live solitary, brutish, short lives. To just give a quick synopsis of what Hobbes says, in other words, men have to come up with a compact to avoid this. In other words, a social contract, which in our case would be our Constitution in the United States. So, in that mindset, in the Hobbesian mindset, government is the solution to anarchy. And once you have that, then you've got different clubs, religious leaders, and political parties. And that's the problem for the central government, is they have to figure out how to handle these worms of the Commonwealth, as Hobbes called them. And then you see types of resistance begin to emerge. And we talked about the history of those different things, getting all into the French Revolution. And we looked at the second body of the king and that sort of thing. So when it comes to these things, I found a couple of different readings. One of those, when we talk about political parties as a worm of the Commonwealth, people like George Washington said that we shouldn't have those types of things, that they're bad for our republic. But Dr. Jessica Bullman Posen of the Harvard Law Review wrote in 2014 that she believes that political parties can be a safeguard for federalism. In other words, they can make corrections on each other when we go from one to the other. Kind of like steering down the interstate. You don't actually keep your wheel straight all the time. You have to make little corrections. So that's one way to approach it. On the other hand, Cynthia J. Bowling and J. Mitchell Pickrell of Oxford feel that the polarization in the United States today has political parties to thank for that, because they're so diametrically opposed and everything is so polarized, so they can't ever get anything done, and thus it hampers federalism. So those are two different ways to look at that. But the central question in the size and scale of government in America is, how big should our government be? What our parties and politicians have always argued about, really, is this question of the size and scope of government. Big government can meet your needs, but it can also crush your individual rights. Small government, in the minds of some, leads to anarchy, as Hobbes said. So early on in the United States, we had the fight between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, the big centralized government or the smaller state governments in that loose confederation or alliance for the purpose of defense and a few other things. We found out in Daniel Shay's rebellion that a confederation doesn't work very well. So we have to find the balance somewhere. But this federalism versus the idea of the Confederacy and states' rights argument, in part, leads up to our Civil War. So we fought about this all the way through. In fact, in the time of Jackson, with the nullification crisis, can a state nullify a law that it doesn't like from the feds? Dr. Heather K. Gerken of Yale University Law School argues that federalism today has evolved into a new type of arrangement um, between the states and the national government, where they work in tandem to regulate, and they're able to delegate the different things that they're supposed to be regulating, so therefore they're supposed to work together, so they don't have to be diametrically opposed. Which one is it? I'm not sure, but I've really enjoyed this course. I've enjoyed this subject matter, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation this evening.